Nobody told me about the silence, not the good silence, not the peaceful, settled, end of a long day silence that I had known my whole life, the silence of a household gone to rest, of work finished, of the lamp turned low. This was a different silence, the silence of two people in the same room who do not yet know each other, who have said their vows in front of 300 people and eaten the wedding food and received the community's blessing and are now, for the first time in their lives, completely alone together. With no script, no elder in the room, no familiar rhythm to fall into, just silence, and the sound of my own breathing, and the understanding, arriving slowly and then all at once, that I had no idea what came next. I was 20 years old. I had been married for 6 hours, and the life I had prepared for my entire existence had just begun, and nobody had told me it would feel like starting something I did not know how to start. My name is Leah, and tonight I want to tell you what nobody told me about marriage. Not the dramatic things, not the things that make good stories from the outside, the quiet things, the ordinary things, the things that lived in the space between what I had been taught to expect and what I actually found when I got there. Let me start with what I had been told, because the gap between what I was told and what I found is the whole story. I had been told that marriage was the fulfillment of a woman's purpose, not cruelly, with genuine warmth, with the sincerity of people who believed it completely. My mother had said it. The older women in our community had said it in the careful language of advice given to young women preparing for their own households. The bishop had said it from the front of the church more times than I could count. A faithful woman, a faithful marriage, a faithful household. These were the 3 things that added up to a faithful life. I had absorbed this so completely that I had stopped hearing it as instruction and started hearing it as simple truth. What nobody told me was what the fulfillment actually felt like from the inside. What nobody told me was that purpose and peace are not the same thing, that you can be exactly where you were always supposed to be and still feel, in the quiet moments, a kind of vertigo that has no name in the language you were given. The first week of my marriage, I made a discovery that sounds small and was not small. I discovered that I did not know my husband's preferences, not the large things. I knew his faith, his work ethic, his standing in the community. I knew the things that a courtship conducted in public and in careful fragments had allowed me to know. What I did not know was the small things, whether he liked his coffee strong or weak, what he did when he could not sleep, what made him laugh, really laugh, the unguarded kind, what he was afraid of, what he regretted, what he hoped for in a way he had never said out loud to anyone. I was living with a stranger, a kind stranger, a faithful stranger, a stranger I had committed my life to in front of 300 witnesses. But a stranger. And nobody had told me that this was what the beginning of marriage actually was. Not the arrival at something complete, but the beginning of the long, slow, daily work of learning someone from scratch. I sat with that in the early mornings of the first week, before the household woke, in the particular dark that comes just before dawn, when the world is quiet enough to be honest in. I sat with it, and I turned it over, and I tried to understand why nobody had prepared me for it. The answer, I think, is that the community's framework for marriage did not have much room for this kind of preparation. Marriage was presented as a role, as a set of responsibilities and a structure of relationship, clearly defined, with each person's place clearly marked. What was less addressed was the texture of it, the actual daily lived experience of building a life with another specific human being whose interior world was as complicated as your own. The community prepared you to be a wife. It did not prepare you to know a husband. Week 3. I burned the bread. Again. I had been burning things since the wedding because the new kitchen had a stove that ran hotter than the one I had grown up with, and I had not yet adjusted my understanding of it. My mother-in-law came by that afternoon and saw the burned bread on the board and said nothing. Her not saying was a specific kind of not saying that I understood completely. I stood at the sink with my back to her, and I felt something that I recognized, with a small, cold clarity, as shame. Not grief, not frustration, shame. The particular shame of someone who is being evaluated against a standard and coming up short. Nobody had told me that the early months of marriage would feel, in certain moments, like a test I had not studied for. That I would feel watched and measured in ways that were not cruel, but were real. That the transition from daughter to wife involved a quiet shift in social position that placed me in the particular scrutiny of women who had already made the transition and were, consciously or not, comparing my performance to their own. I told Jonas about the shame one evening. Not planned. It came out in the way that things come out when you are tired enough that the careful management of what you say stops working. I said, I feel like I am failing something and I do not know what it is. He put down what he was doing. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, Leah, I burn things too. I burned the feed this morning and did not tell anyone. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a solution to anything structural. But it was the first moment in 3 weeks of marriage where I felt something I had not expected to feel. The specific relief of being seen by the person I was living with, of having said something true and had it received with something true in return, of understanding that the stranger I had married was also, in his own way, navigating something he had not been fully prepared for either. That moment was the first real thing in our marriage, the first thing that belonged to us specifically, and not to the roles we were filling. Month 2. I had adjusted to the stove. The bread stopped burning. Small victories. Month 2 was when I started to understand something about loneliness that I had not understood before. I had grown up surrounded by people, a large household, a tight community, the constant warm proximity of others. I had never been lonely in the conventional sense, and yet in the second month of my marriage, living in a household with my husband, receiving regular visits from family and community members, embedded in the same communal life I had always been embedded in, I was lonely in a way I had never been before. The loneliness was not about absence of people, it was about the absence of a particular kind of being known. The being known that comes from years of daily proximity, from your mother understanding your moods before you have named them, from a sister finishing your sentences, from the specific intimacy of people who have known you so long they have stopped needing to learn you. Jonas did not know me that way yet. I did not know him that way yet. We were building it, but building it meant being in the in-between, not strangers anymore, not yet the fully known thing that years of marriage would eventually produce. Just two people in the middle of learning each other, which is its own kind of alone. Nobody told me that the beginning of a marriage was a form of loneliness. Nobody told me that the loneliness was not a sign that something was wrong, that it was simply the texture of the beginning, that it would change. It changed. Slowly, then all at once, the way most important things change. By the end of the first year, there were things Jonas knew about me that nobody else knew. There were things I knew about him that I did not know about anyone else. The stranger had become something else, not fully known yet, not after 1 year, but no longer a stranger. Someone I was in the middle of knowing. Someone the middle itself was worth being in. I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me. Not instead of what I was told. The faith and the purpose and the structure were all real and all mattered. But alongside it, in addition, with the same seriousness and the same warmth, I wish someone had told me that marriage begins in the middle of not knowing, that the silence of two people who are still strangers to each other is not a failure, it is the starting point. That building a life with another person is a long work, the longest kind, and that the beginning of it feels like beginning because it is beginning, not because you have done something wrong. I wish someone had told me about the burned bread and the shame and the specific loneliness of the in-between. Not to frighten me, to prepare me, to give me the words for what I would feel, so that when I felt it, I would know. This is normal. This is the texture of the beginning. This is what it feels like to start. You are allowed to be in the beginning. You are allowed to not know yet. You are allowed to be in the middle of learning someone rather than already at the end of it. That is what nobody told me. I am telling you now.